Hello, and thank you so much for taking the time today to join us for a cybersecurity interactive webinar. Here at Biltmore Capital, we provide our clients with a full range of wealth management services, and as fiduciaries, our investment professionals are committed to understanding your individual financial circumstances and providing sound, long-term solutions with a high level of client service. Part of that client service is bringing educational webinars such as this one to you that can hopefully add some value to your everyday life. Today, we'll be learning best practices when it comes to safe cyber hygiene. Cybersecurity threats have increased due to the increase in unprotected online users, especially those working from home, which a lot of us have been doing due to COVID. We may not know the areas we are vulnerable now, but hopefully after today's session, you'll feel more comfortable and confident on how to protect yourself against cyber criminals. Today, we have invited Paul Ewing, Senior Technology Consultant, and his colleague Jonathan Watchkin, Senior Consultant with Business Consulting Services, both with Charles Schwab and Company. Both Paul and John are specialists when it comes to cybersecurity, and they stay up to date with the latest cybersecurity threats and cybersecurity advances, and will be an excellent resource for us today. Please be sure to submit your questions if you have not done so already in the comment section on the bottom of the Zoom window. If we do not get to your question today, we will be sure to get back to you with an answer after the webinar. With that, let's begin with the topic of email. In general, email use has gone up drastically in the last year thanks to COVID. We all use it, and it would be great to know the best practices when it comes to email. Like, when is it okay to click on links in an email? When is it okay to send and receive documents? And with that, I will leave it to you, Paul or John, who would like to take the first question.
Jonathan, you're on mute, I think.
I am. Welcome to COVID world and WebEx.
Yeah,
so I'll go ahead and hop in. Paul, please go ahead and add color as well. But email is always a great place to start, simply because we're all familiar with email at this point. We've been using it for decades. And I think and myself and Paul included, what we sometimes fall into is trusting email a little bit too much, right? We always trust the place it came from. We always trust that when we're sending it to someone else, they're only going to be the individuals who see that. And really what we want to think email is really like a postcard. So it's sent, assume whatever you've written in that email can be seen, whether it's on your computer, whether it's in transit, whether it's on the other person's computer. And so while it's fine for communication and making sure that we're not really sharing anything that's non-public information, we definitely don't want to add social security numbers, account numbers, or anything else that's really going to identify us or parts of our financial picture. So really, for best practices, keep email conversational. It's great for catching up with individuals. If you have important information to share, if someone's asking for specific information, we always say, hey, defer to a phone call. You know who's on the other end of that line. There's not other individuals who are listening. And so it's really best practice just to share that personal information, not through email. The other thing I would add here too is, I was guilty of this in college, went to college from 2000 to 2005, and, my mom would ask me for my tax returns. And so back then we never really thought about cybersecurity. And so I would fill out my tax returns, think of all the information's on there. It's my bank information, it's my social security number. That was through a Yahoo account. And I never hit delete. That information still lives in my sent folder. We now know that Yahoo has been breached. Every account has roughly been breached 2 times over. And so what these cyber criminals will do is they'll go into an email box and they'll start to look for specific information. They'll do a search for SNN, for social, for account number. They'll see who I was speaking with. And so something that I sent 20 years ago is now in the hands of a cyber criminal, simply because 20 years ago I felt fine chasing that down and sending it through those channels. So always practice good hygiene, clean out your sent box, delete your trash folder. If it's been a while since you've changed your email password, just go ahead and do that just to make yourself feel more comfortable. And sorry, Paul, I'm dragging on here. I don't know if you have anything to add there as well.
Yeah, no, thanks, Jonathan. And Jenny, thanks for having us, by the way. Jonathan and I really enjoy these discussions, and hopefully everyone will go away with some nuggets of knowledge and maybe change some of the behaviors that you have now with regards to cybersecurity. So, Jonathan, I think you nailed most of the big ones. We have a colleague who firmly believes that email is public enemy number one. You can think of like all the bad stuff is coming through email these days. So that's the least or the point of least resistance for fraudsters or bad actors. Many of you probably have spam filters on your email, and some of that junk is being filtered out. But there are opportunities for these fraudsters to send what we refer to as phishing emails. So these are emails that are designed to look like a legitimate email. So, Jonathan mentioned, take a look at what's in your inbox, take a look at, what is being sent. Sometimes these emails are very difficult to spot. Back 5 years ago, they were super easy to spot. We all got the, maybe it was from some prince in Africa, or it was, an email with bad spelling and bad grammar asking for wire transfers. So that was an email, a fraud email from years gone by. This is, 2021. They look really good, and they are going to be spelled correctly. They're going to have logos and material in those emails that look completely legitimate. So it does take a little bit of extra time to pay attention, study where that email is coming from. Always take a look or hover over the address. It may say somebody's name, but if you hover over it, you're going to see actually where the domain address is coming from. And if it's not related to the email content or the subject, it's probably not a legitimate email. Those emails too, they are really trying to engage you in either clicking on a link. Usually these emails have embedded links. They are encouraging you or urging you to take action. Click that link. A lot of times we'll see, hey, your email or this account has been corrupted. Please click on this link and reset your password. So if you were to click on that link, it may take you out to what we refer to as a spoofed website. So it'll be a website that'll look like Microsoft or it'll look like Apple, and it's going to ask you to put in your credentials. But really, what you're doing is providing your credentials to the bad guy. So if it feels like there's some bit of urgency, take a step back, pause, study the email again. And if there's any attachments, and the attachments look funny, right? If it's a weird extension, if it's not your standard, PDF document, if it's some sort of dot and you've never seen that extension, or even a zip file, the ZIP extension, sometimes those are malicious attachments that are a part of that email. So I'll leave one last tip here for email. And I mentioned that we're all getting the spam and the things are just coming into our email box. Some of this may be legitimate marketing that you have subscribed to over time, but pay attention to the unsubscribe button, because a lot of these emails will contain an unsubscribe, which, gosh, it seems easy to just click the link and these emails will go away. Sometimes those unsubscribe buttons take you to a bad place, or they're essentially asking you to confirm information that they really should probably have already. So again, it's be suspect of that. The best thing to do if you're getting these marketing emails and you just don't want to see them anymore, if you just continually drag them into your junk folder, typically the email systems will learn that behavior, and over time they'll just automatically route to the junk folder. You'll never see them in your inbox.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, I'm just, as far as sending information via email, I know we got a lot of questions about that. What would be your advice on sending personal documents that might
Yeah.
contain some confidential information?
So, I mean, the easy thing is to don't do it. So as Jonathan mentioned, email is not secure. It's a postcard. Um, there are ways to transmit documents and information in a more secure manner. And typically we always make the recommendation of a secure portal. So, whether that's Jenny, you're sending a link that is directing your end clients to a destination that is your vault destination. That's the best way to upload and download documents and get that information back and forth in a secure manner. Don't use email. It was never designed to be secure. Use the portals, use the vaults, and sometimes even like box.net or Dropbox. Those are also ways to share folders, or maybe even like Google Drive or OneDrive has the capability of sharing documents. Use all of those services before you send something over email. I don't know, I didn't leave you there anything to add there, Jonathan, but do you have anything?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would add is when we get busy, it's very easy for us to just hit reply and respond to whatever information someone's looking for. Perfect example, my sister recently got divorced and her ex-husband was still on all her beneficiary documents. And so she shot me an IM and said, hey, I need your social so I can go ahead and transfer this information over. I was in the middle of meetings. It was Monday at like 2 p.m. I almost fell for that trap, and I almost sent my social security number simply because it's convenient, and it felt like a little bit of an emergency. So I paused, which is what we always tell you to do. Just kind of take a deep breath and think about what you're about to do. And then I called her. It was a 20-second phone call. I gave her my social security number, and then we kind of quickly solved for that scenario. So, as we go throughout this entire process, you're probably going to hear pause, think, what's the best way for me to get this information? The last thing that we'll say, and we covered it already on the email piece, but if I were to email her my social and she were to delete it, well, now it's in her trash folder, and trash gets purged maybe every 30 or 60 days. So if someone's already in her email and they have access to her trash folder, she might have deleted it, but that information is still there. So the paper trail is long and complex, and a phone call or one of those secure messaging options is always the best case scenario. So that's all I would add there.
Perfect. Awesome. From what I understand, they can also hide in your email box for quite some time and just kind of check it out, right? So, you just got to make sure that. What kind of brings me to my next topic of passwords. We would love to get your advice on credentials and safest way of. I mean, we have so many apps these days, so how to just have a handle on that, and when to update, what your recommendations would be on passwords in general. Like, should they be longer, or should there be more characters?
Sure. Great question. I'll try not to bore everyone with the details, but the study behind this stuff is absolutely fascinating. And it's interesting because we always hear about emails being compromised. So Yahoo, AOL, Google, Apple, they've all had some sort of incidents where emails were compromised. And you might think, well, listen, I don't have a ton of interesting stuff on my email. I'm just sending information back and forth. The problem is, think of all the websites that you do have sensitive information on. So bank accounts, custodial information, whatever. Generally, your login is your email address. And if you're like me in the past, passwords are tough to remember, and we can't remember all of them. And so we'll have the same password for these other ancillary websites or something incredibly similar. Now, myself as a cyber criminal, if I now have your email address and I have your password, I'm going to log into your email. I'm going to look, okay, well, now I see your bank is sending you information. I'm going to go to that bank's website. Your custodian is sending you information. I'll go to that custodial website. And very simply, I'm going to try your username as your email and your password is your password. And if you've got slight iterations of your password, there's very easy software to download at this point that will try all of those iterations. So if you capitalize some stuff, if you throw a 0 in instead of an O, very easy for these cyber criminals to what we call brute force hack, which is basically just guess your password. And so, when we talk about credentialing, that's really where we talk about, well, what does secure credentialing actually mean? And the individual who came out years and years and years ago who said, hey, make your passwords really complex. So special character, numbers, letters, uppercase, lowercase. I can't remember any of that stuff. I don't think I'm alone in that regard. This person actually came out 2 years ago and said, hey, I messed up. The longer the password, even if it's completely lowercase, is much more difficult to break into than something that's very complex. And so, and Paul, I'll pass it to you for the password manager piece, but think about the websites that you're very interested in protecting. So anything with financial information, anything with personal information, these are passwords we want to be very long and complex passwords. So for me, for my password manager, and Paul will talk about what those look like, I have a 27-character passphrase. It's completely lowercase. I type it exactly as I would say it. I've even got commas in there. For someone to try to guess a 27-character password, it's going to take decades, if not centuries. The problem is if I had an 8-character password, no matter how complex, it'll take them an hour or two. And so, first of all, think about, okay, so if I've got a password manager and that holds all my information, let's make this password extremely long and difficult to guess. But then the next question would obviously be, okay, well, now that I've got all these passwords, how do I make them complex without making it, take me 45 minutes to log in? And so that's why we talk about password managers as well.
Yeah. So great stuff there, Jonathan. I'll get us to password managers because that's the technology that can help manage this. But to build upon what Jonathan mentioned about the guy who gave the initial instructions on the guidelines for passwords, that short but complex password really just created a terrible habit that we all got ourselves into. And, Jonathan called it out, right? I'm going to use exclamation point instead of a 1 or an I. And the technology that can brute force break passwords is really, really fast at this. So complex passwords, they're difficult to remember. Also, that guy said, hey, you should change your password more frequently. So now you're maybe just adding numbers to the ends or just, creating some small variation in the password. Terrible habits we all got into. So we need to break it. And the way to break it is everything should have a unique long password. And Jonathan mentioned the strategy of using a passphrase. That's a great way to create very long passwords. And again, they don't need to be super complex with numbers and capitals and symbols. A long single lowercase password is just fine. And the challenge is now still, how do I remember these really long passwords? Well, there is technology. It's referred to as password manager technology, and there are a number of them that are out there on the marketplace. And it's an application that you can download on your computer or download on your phone, and it is designed to remember your passwords. And so I think as folks start to use a password, you're gonna start to collect and put in the passwords. These systems tend to make it a little bit easier. They'll pull if you're storing passwords in your browser, it's gonna load them in, or it's gonna bring those in from there. If you have them in another source or a spreadsheet, they make the setup process a little bit easier. The thing I really like about password managers is that they also can shame you a little bit, at least the ones I've used, where if I'm using that same password and it knows that I've used it on 20 other sites, it's going to tell me and say, hey, this needs to be changed. And that technology will help me generate a random password that I'll never remember. I'll never want to know. I'll use my password manager technology to pull it in or to click a link on a login page, and it will sync it and log me in. So this technology is, I'd say, a lifesaver. It's changed my just total online habits and presence. I always try to talk to my family and friends about how they're managing their passwords. And, I've heard it all from, I've got it in a password protected spreadsheet, or I had a colleague who once told me, he said, I'll give you 15 minutes to dig through my office to try to find my passwords written down. I never took him up on that offer, but, everyone has their own strategy. Usually it's not very strong, and this technology can create strong passwords for you and keep them secure in an encrypted way, so that you're able to access them through, like I mentioned, a phone app or an application that you would install on your PC at home.
And
let me give you some. Maybe you were just about to go there, Jonathan. Then I guess the next question is, well, what do you recommend for a password manager? So we won't make it an official recommendation, but I will definitely tell you the ones that I've used and what some of our colleagues use. So probably the most popular one we see is called LastPass. So LASTPASS. I use personally a password manager called 1Password. So the number 1 and then password. I've used Dashlane before, DASHLANE, as another provider. So those are probably the 3 big ones that are out there. Plan to pay for your service here. Don't just subscribe to the free versions. Usually they just have a limited number of passwords it'll maintain for you. Or the cool thing about these systems is the syncing that can happen between your desktop and your mobile device. So if you make a change on one application, it's going to sync it over, together. So you're not constantly managing version control. And it's a couple dollars a month, and it's a great peace of mind to keep your passwords safe. Now, Jonathan, I cut you off.
No, that's great. The only thing else I was going to add there is, so my wife and I obviously share a couple of websites like utilities or some of the streaming services we have. And obviously in the COVID environment, I've wanted to share that with my mom, or, my mom is recently widowed and she's got some financials that she just wants me to keep an eye on, not power of attorney, nothing else like that, just an opportunity to poke my head in when she has questions. And we've all had that scenario where someone says, well, tell me how to log into your website, or I want to be able to share something with you. And so what I've done is, with the password manager, I've set up a family account so that when my mother wants me to hop in on something, or she says, hey, I'd feel better if you just had access to this stuff if I'm overseas, she can share very specific websites with me. The nice part of that is I can't see what that password is. It just allows me to autofill with that hash tag, right? So I can't write it down. And then log into those websites. Or if my sister wants to hop on our streaming service, I can go ahead and share that password with her, and not everything else that lives within there. So that kind of solves for that problem too, which I think is pretty nice.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and let me add to that too. So the reason I chose 1Password was because I have kids now that are online, and they have a really nice family plan. So I can leverage multiple users. And my family, just like how Jonathan's doing with his wife, you're able to share passwords that are family related, or where there is some sort of joint ownership. Also, I know Dashlane has this feature that if you pass away, you can create a next of kin who would take over or be in charge of those passwords. And I think you can even get into like a period of time that after death, that person would then have access to, your credentials, or they'd be able to gain access to your passwords. I know that it's kind of morbid to think that, but I mean, think of all of the information that's locked up in websites and logins. And if someone, tragically passes away, some of that is very difficult to gain access to.
Very good advice. Yes, 100%. I know here at the office, we try to, anytime there's a multi-factor, like two-factor authentication, we definitely encourage that. And I know we have a lot of apps that recognizes our IP address, but if we are logging on, if for any reason, if that does change, then it does require that two-factor authentication where we get a text or an email, just that double sense of security. Well, thank you for that information. We did get a few questions when it came to encryption, whether or not that's needed. Do you have any advice when it comes to encryption on mobile devices and computers? Like, why is it
Jonathan, I'll let
important?
you take this one.
So the good news is if you have an Apple device, encryption is probably already turned on. What we always say is trust but verify. So go to the Apple Store. If you've got someone in the family who's technology forward, go ahead and encrypt that device. And so we've all heard about ransomware. And ransomware is when someone sends you a malicious link, and then what they'll do is they'll hold your computer hostage and they'll say, hey, you've got 72 hours to pay me, or I'm going to release your information, or I'm going to delete your information. As scary as that is, encryption works in reverse as well. So if we have encrypted devices, then cyber criminals can't get into those devices because encrypted devices are extremely, extremely secure. So again, think about where your important data is: your computer, your laptop, your cell phone. If you're traveling a lot, my peace of mind is, hey, if my laptop's encrypted and I lose it, I'm not worried about anyone else being able to find the information in there. I'm just worried about having to buy a brand new laptop. And then we can talk about backups if you want to, because that's a whole nother thread. But if you're running Windows devices, anything above Home Edition will have BitLocker as an option. It's not immediately turned on, but that is something that I've turned on, again, for my laptop. For my phone, we'll go into VPNs a little bit as well, but virtual private networks, antivirus, they should have some component of encryption as well. So it's just a quick ask, call the service department of the technology that you use. You might already have something in place that you're paying for that you don't know of. I'm sure Norton offers that as well, and some of the other antivirus providers out there. It will require you to enter in a password, right? So security is obviously more painful than less, which is why it works. And so I have to put in a password before my laptop boots up, but the peace of mind of if it gets lost, if it gets stolen, if something else happens to it, I don't care what's on there because I know it's safe. I just now need to replace the device that I lost. So big proponents of it. Just make sure you're doing it in a smart manner. For a throwaway laptop that I might give someone to have whatever on it that I know I don't have any important information on it, then that's probably not a step I would take, because I know personally that there's nothing on there that I would worry about losing. So just make sure you're doing it in an intelligent way.
Yeah, I'll just only add that if you have mobile or laptops, I would always recommend that you enable some level of encryption, because if that device, as mobile as it is, it's easy to lose, it's easy for it to be stolen, and if that encryption is in place, the criminals will have no access to your data.
Right.
And if we even think about, if you, like when you replace a cell phone, and I've done this numerous times in the past, you upgrade, you give them your old device, you walk away, and maybe a week later you think, oh, shoot, I totally forgot to wipe that device. It's got my bank information, it's probably some auto logins. So again, if they can't get into that device without wiping it completely, then that's an encrypted device, and I don't care that I forgot about that. So even if it's something as innocuous as a simple mistake, then that's just, we're protecting ourselves from ourselves. So that's another reason for it.
So I know I'm guilty of this, but a lot of times when we get these updates with applications that we use, how important is it to really make sure that we are updating when it asks us to, and keeping our technology up to date?
Yes, I love this question. Don't ignore the updates. Please don't ignore the updates. Many of our systems, your operating systems, there are patches that come, gosh, it feels like almost every day. And what those patches are, or those updates, those are vulnerabilities that were uncovered, and now they are fixing that vulnerability. They're closing that door. So that's what you're patching. That is what you're updating. I know it will probably feel like it always is intrusive and it takes too long. If you can keep up on it and do them as they come in, it's always going to be a little bit of a better user experience. But that's the reason why those exist. The vulnerabilities are found out, and Apple and Windows, Microsoft, they're patching those vulnerabilities, and that's just operating system updates that we're talking about. All of you should be running some level of antivirus or anti-malware on your devices. Those have regular updates and regular schedules for scanning. Make sure you're also staying on top of that. The biggest hassle, I would say, and my son is a victim of this all the time, where he's like you, Jenny. He likes to ignore them, and then he'll ignore it until it's just like his computer either slows down or it's just like not functioning. And my question to him was, well, when did you do your last update? And he doesn't have an answer for me. And it's frustrating for him because we have like a backlog of updates now that have to come through. And instead of just a 5-minute disruption, we're now reloading for like 3 hours. So stay on top of your updates. That is actually what criminals are taking advantage of. We talked about the malicious email and phishing. Links to bogus websites may have software on there that can take advantage of those vulnerabilities. And again, that's what you're trying to close down are all of the vulnerabilities with those updates and the patching.
And that's really what those cyber criminals are looking for. They're looking for everybody that hasn't done those updates yet. So
that's exactly it.
Well, and that's why the WannaCry a couple of years ago was so impactful. It wasn't that anyone did anything wrong, but what they did is they noticed a vulnerability. And for people who took 3 months to either ignore those patches or to wait and patch, I mean, that thing spread like wildfire. So as a best practice, what I do with my home PCs and my work laptop, I just leave them on overnight. I think Tuesdays or Wednesdays are generally when Microsoft throws out their updates, but I have it run at 2 a.m. I'm sleeping. I wake up in the morning. Everything's ready to go. If I forget, or if we have a power surge and it says, hey, you've got updates, just hit OK, go grab a cup of coffee, go enjoy the sunrise. And then by the time you get back, you should be ready to go. But one of the easiest ways to protect yourselves and one of the most overlooked, I think.
Yeah. And I would say if you're not running Windows 10, it's time for a new machine. If you're not running on a current operating system, or if your device does not support a current operating system, it's time to retire that device and upgrade, because you need to be running on current operating system.
Awesome. So I guess a great tip would be, we got a couple questions, like what happens if you do get hacked, or you're suspicious, you think you got hacked, you clicked on a link, what would be the next steps?
So I'm going to preface everything that we say that Jenny's got a great resource that she's going to send after this webinar. It tells you if you think you've been compromised, not only on your computer, but financially or any other metric. Maybe you answered a phone call and gave information, and then you realized it probably wasn't the person who you thought it was. It's a 3-page document. It tells you what to do immediately in the first week, in the first month. What I did, I created that for my mom. I told her to print it out, throw it next to your computer. You don't need it until you need it, and then you absolutely need to have it immediately. So just keep it within arm's reach. The biggest things I would say is, power your machine down. If you know that you've already been compromised, the problem is it's very complex to get that person out of your machine. So you can at least stop the flow of data by turning it off, unplugging it from the electrical socket and from your network. Take it to a trusted device, whether that's or a service, whether that's the local IT shop, if you've got someone in-house. But the biggest concern we have, and we talk about this all the time with our advisor clients, is simply you need to be able to trust that device again. And honestly, this is just me, and I'm paranoid, but if I were to be compromised, I'd probably just buy a new machine. And I trust my backups and my cloud storage enough where, listen, I can wipe this computer 3 or 4 times. I'm still nervous plugging it back in. Someone might still be looking over my shoulder. They might be looking at the screens I'm looking at. Again, if you've got a resource close by who can replace the hard drive or who can do, we call it a DoD wipe, that, Department of Defense type wipe, then I think you're going to be safe. The other thing for myself, and this is more on the financial front, we talk about credit monitoring agencies and credit freezes. And so I was part of the Equifax hack. I think we all kind of remember that event, whether or not we were part of it. And so after that, because it was so wide ranging, before you would have to pay to freeze your credit. And now it's free across all 3 agencies, which is really nice. So for me, it's an extra step. So when I refinanced my house last year, I had to unlock or unfreeze all of those credit reporting agencies just so that someone could run my credit, refinance my house. The positive aspect of that, though, is that cyber criminals can't create accounts in your name if they have your social, if they have your address, if they have all the information they need, because they don't know the password to unlock your credit. The other side of that is LifeLock through Norton, and there's some other credit monitoring agencies. Those work great, and they'll give you a call if they think something is being a little bit malicious. The problem, though, is that's ad hoc, and that's after the fact. And so that account's already established. The wire transfer might already be ready to go. It's still better than nothing. It's better than not finding out about it for a couple of months. But, go to each one of the credit monitoring agencies. You can freeze your credit. It's a very simple step. It took me 5 minutes to unfreeze that for refinancing purposes or when I, buy my next car. And then I can just unlock it for a day and it locks back up. And I know no one else can leverage my information to open up accounts that I don't know about.
Yeah, I'll add some other tips here. So my biggest tip is just be vigilant on your information. And what I mean by that is, Jonathan mentioned the credit bureaus and the freezing of your credit. There are also services that you can, monitor daily. What's my credit score? I use a service called Credit Karma. It's a free service, and it gives me access to 2 credit bureaus. And I'm able to see if new lines of credit are opened. I will get notification of essentially immediately anytime my credit is run. And so I'm constantly in tune with what's happening in my financial world. So that's one tip. Also, it may be that there's some funny transactions that are happening in a bank account. Pay attention to your statements as they're coming in. I know it's hopefully most of us are electing the paperless option on our statements, and certainly we're saving trees there and in the postage, but I think that really puts it out of mind many times. So when was the last time you went in and looked at some bank statements or credit card statements, or even utilities? So if things are monitored on a regular basis, you're going to pick up and see something that, hey, this doesn't seem right, or I don't remember this, and that can get you into a situation where, all right, I'm going to investigate this, or I'm going to call the credit card company and maybe open up an investigation. And I would say time is of the essence usually, because the longer this sits open or longer it's the fraudsters or the bad actors are able to act, the more damage that can be done. So just try to stay on top of it as best as possible.
Awesome. I'll be sure to send that out to everybody after the webinar so that you have that handy in case you do suspect that your security has been breached. We had a few questions when it came to social media, how you could be more careful, how cyber criminals are looking through your Facebook information in order to help them, prove that they're you. What are your tips when it comes to social media?
I know you love this one, Jonathan. But I'll start us out. Hopefully, we won't steal too much of your thunder. You just really have to be careful of what you're putting out in social media land. It's so easy to provide information on, hey, we're vacationing, or I'm not at home, I'm clearly somewhere else, I just posted some pictures, or just providing information that can be used against you at some point. I'm going to steal your thunder, Jonathan, because I know this, that you've seen this happen on Facebook and Instagram, and maybe some of your clients have seen this, Jenny. Hey, here's a list of questions, fill in the answers, and let's all share the answers. And really what that list of questions is, what's your mascot to high school? What city were you born in? These are all answers to the questions that are asked when you're trying to reset your password. So all of that information can be cobbled together from social media and used against you to essentially gain access to information. So, where a phishing email is coming into your inbox and you're, interacting with it, and maybe you're giving up some information there. With social media, it doesn't feel bad to share some of that information, and we all do it so readily. So just be careful what you're posting. Be careful what you share. I don't know. I always have a number of folks in my feed that, like, why are they sharing this? They're just oversharing, and it's just annoying. But you just keep scrolling and you're on to the next one. But just be careful of what you're putting out into the world. I don't know, Jonathan, did I leave you anything to add?
Yeah, like one or two things, I guess. That was pretty good, Paul. So there's two other examples that I'll bring up. So we heard about a Facebook breach that actually wasn't a breach, that happened a couple of months ago, and that was a large amount of Facebook information that was actually publicly facing. So Facebook posts and profile information that cyber criminals just consolidated into a database. And the interesting thing about these cyber criminals is, hey, if I stole a bunch of information, so I breached Yahoo and I stole a bunch of usernames and passwords, I don't know what to do with it. I'm just going to sell this list on the dark web. And that list will go for a couple of $1,000s. That's money in my pocket. But the person who bought that list, okay, well, now I've got all this Facebook information, right? Username is probably your email address. So now I can link Joe Smith with his cat's name and his place of birth and where he works and a bunch of other information. And so cyber criminals, all they do is build on information, and that's why they're so good. So same thing with social media. Just be really careful. Facebook changes their security settings all the time, so just make sure you're up to date. You're not sharing things publicly. And the other aspect of that that I was going to bring up is, even without social media. So we talked about email a while ago. Cyber criminals are very patient. And so if they've breached one of these two systems, they're just going to hang out. They're going to read your information. And we see it all the time. Someone is looking for their dream home. It's been 8 or 9 months, and suddenly they found what they wanted. And cyber criminals in line in an email will simply change the wire instructions. So it's a legitimate house. It's a legitimate purchase. They know that money is going in a certain direction, and a cyber criminal will say, nope, I want it to come into my account. And it's email. We get into that tendency. We know that the mortgage individual is expecting this information, and we'll go ahead and we'll just say, yeah, that's fine. And so when we bought our house up here in New Hampshire a couple of years ago, I had to make sure that the person who was doing my mortgage spoke with me on the phone, simply because I wanted them to realize, hey, You're dealing with me. I am dealing with the person who I think I'm actually working with. And 85 to 90% of fraud we see across our network that happens daily can be solved by a phone call. And so we overemphasize, pick up the phone, make that telephone call. FaceTime or any other sort of web conference is super easy. I can now see that it's the person I'm talking on the other end of the line. But just keep in mind that the more information we put out there, the more it's just being built in some sort of database, and someone who's way smarter than me will figure out how to exploit it. So that's why just be a little bit vigilant on what you're sharing.
Awesome. Great tips. Well, we are coming up towards the end of our webinar. I guess the last little bit of advice we'd like to get is just, a lot of us are working from home. So what would be your, top 5 things to do, or top 3, as far as just making sure everything is secure? I know a lot of times when you're at home, cyber criminals, they're targeting you because you don't have the normal firewalls, I guess, or they think that you might not have them. But just for the people that are working from home still, what would be, your top 3 things to make sure that they're doing?
Paul, looks like you want to go.
Yeah, well, my big one is the your router and your modem. This is equipment that has usernames and passwords associated to them. And so my first suggestion is, to ask, when was the last time you changed that password? And usually the answer is it's never been changed. And your provider typically is probably the one who gave you that password. So make sure you go in and update that device, and again, make it a long password, and save it in your password manager. And then those devices typically have some level of what's referred to as firmware. So these are sort of the updates for physical devices. And so we talked about the software updates on your computer and your mobile devices. Other hardware has updates that are referred to as firmware. So, another suggestion would be to make sure that that device is running on the most current version of its available firmware. And, typically those, if it's a cable or like a DSL provider, those devices have some level of firewall capabilities, just that are just a part of the device itself. So make sure that those are enabled, that functionality isn't enabled. The big thing with Wi-Fi is that you want to know you want to know who's in control of that connection. So that's why public Wi-Fi is never a great idea, because you don't know who's maintaining the security on that Wi-Fi connection. You don't know who's on the other side of that connection. So in a home environment, you're working from home, you control the device, you control the environment. And so again, you want to try to make that as secure as possible. Jonathan, what else would you add?
And it could have even been
thing,
things that we've, brought up during this webinar. So it doesn't necessarily have to be anything new, but just what the top 3.
Yeah, I mean, the 2 things I would say, in addition to what Paul mentioned, is passwords are the biggest thing. Our entire lives are online. We're storing information all over the place. Companies we work with have online providers that they work with. So if you've never gone through a password change, look at a password manager, change your passwords. The password manager will make it easy for you, that you don't need to remember them. It's just really good hygiene. This is always the trickle-down effect. So your cell phone company might have been hacked, or if you share that password with your Verizon or AT&T login, well, there's call forwarding, there's text forwarding. And so someone might be receiving a copy of your text. It seems crazy, but if you've never stopped that from happening, it's very possible. And so just think about all of that information. that might be being shared with someone else. So really good hygiene. If you haven't changed your passwords ever, go ahead and do that. It's a great to do. Super easy too. We all know of the really important ones. Start with those. As you visit websites over the course of the rest of the year, just go ahead and change it as you're trying to log into those websites. And the other thing I was going to say is, cybersecurity is always kind of an onion. So if you can create enough layers, these cyber criminals are going to move on to a much easier target. So I don't know about everyone else on this call. We're calling it Zoom fatigue at this point, but the phone call, the webinar, we really miss that in-person interaction. And so it's easy, again, to reply to an email, to send a quick text. These are all text-based items that can go anywhere other than the person that we want them to. So never underestimate the power of a phone call. And I would say, Paul and I, we don't do too many of these because we want to do it with advisor firms who do it right. And so Biltmore is an absolute person in your corner. They understand everything that Schwab is currently doing on the cybersecurity side. So if you ever feel compromised, if you ever have questions, they would absolutely be one of my top phone calls. They can work with us to run anything down. But if you've ever been concerned about an event or whatever, there are additional options that are available to you to, hey, listen, every time we have a conversation, I just want to hop on FaceTime really quickly, or I want you to call me if you ever receive an email from me. Just think about what makes you comfortable in this environment. And that's why we have individuals and companies such as Biltmore, because they do it right and they're an absolute resource. So don't ever hesitate to reach out. And Jenny has our number, so she can always run it up the flagpole too.
That's right. That's right. Well, awesome. Well, I think we're coming up on the end of the webinar. We had a lot of great questions coming from everybody, and thank you so much for your time, Paul and John, for giving us some great tips when it comes to cybersecurity and keeping yourselves safe. And I think you're going to wrap it up. I don't see any additional questions that came through while we were on our webinar, but if you do have any, feel free to reach out to us and we'll be happy to answer them. So with that, thanks again, and hope everybody has a great rest of the day. Thank you again, Jonathan and Paul.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
All right. See you later.
Bye.